Hello, everyone. Today's subject is listening to recordings. So, this is going to be in two quite separate parts. The first one being the act of listening to recordings of yourself playing, and the second part is listening to recordings of others. And I'm going to try and point out to you all the potential benefits of these two things, and also potential ways that these could end up being harmful to your artistry, to your playing, if you're not careful. So, first off, in regards to listening to yourself. So, we live in a time, where we have this gift, some might say, to be able to literally take record of what is going on while we are producing our art and then review it at a later point. And this could happen in the practice room, could happen in performances that you give, or in any other situation. And this is an incredible tool when used correctly, because it gives us the most pure and honest and personal feedback about our own music. So I see it as a potential that one can use to improve on their performances each and every time. But it's not as simple as one might think. So, for example, usually professional athletes will review tape, review film after an event. And they do this in order to see what they did and what they could do better next time. And that's considered by most athletes, I think, an essential tool, something that anybody who wants to be great at what they do should utilize. And for music, I think fundamentally it is the same. We should also utilize that in one way or another. However, art, of course, is a much more subjective thing than athletics. So the art that we create in one moment exists in that moment alone in time. And yes, we can record the physical sound that is happening, but artistically, that moment will have passed. So in that sense, I think recordings of yourself should be listened to, of course, as a reference to see perhaps generally what things you think you could do better at, whether that's aspects of your technique or sound production or whatever it might be, tempos, but all within the understanding that that performance was a holistic experience. And tearing apart a performance in any categories like that at any time kind of is against the point of art, right? So this is a very fine line between trying our best to analyze what we're doing and improve aspects of it while simultaneously respecting the holistic performance and experience. So one tip that I found is very helpful for this is to recognize that directly after you give a performance, you are in such a state of mind that you are more critical than you will ever be about that piece you're playing, because you've just studied it, you practiced it intensely for a length of time, and now your mind is adapted to listening to that piece and your playing of that piece in such a critical way, because we have to do that in order to improve in the practice room. So more often than not, when you listen back to a performance that you just gave immediately after, you're going to find things about it that you don't like. Especially if you have the habit of being overly self-critical, as so many musicians do. So I think that that kind of listening is not really realistic to the performance that you gave and how the audience received that performance. So I would suggest perhaps waiting a little bit, waiting a few weeks, maybe even a few months, and then listen back to that performance and observe how it makes you feel. Not just what you think went right or wrong, but observe how that performance makes you feel. Because I assure you, lovers of art and music, audience members, are not going to a concert to observe what goes right and what goes wrong. At least I think that would be rather silly if they were doing that. They go to a concert to have an experience, right? So you as a listener, you want to put yourself into that space, yeah, and see how your own music gives you an experience. Observe that experience, not just the notes, the timing, whatever, but observe the experience itself. The technical kind of listening can be helpful sometimes in the practice room if you really don't know what's going wrong. If you have a feeling that something in the music is not right, but you really don't know what's going on, try recording yourself and listen back to it then in the practice room. You can use that as a small tool, but I wouldn't rely on that, because once again, music exists in the moment. The performance that you create, that is an artwork that exists in that moment. So the second part of this video is about listening to recordings of others. Now, many people have different beliefs about this, different opinions on whether this is something that can be beneficial or harmful to our own playing, particularly when it's of a piece that you are studying, that you are working on. Some people say that one should never listen to other recordings of a piece they're playing because their interpretation will become biased based on the recordings and not based on the musical text, which makes sense. In my own studying, in my process, I've taken almost the opposite approach, though, which is of listening to as many recordings as I can possibly find of the piece. And the reason for that is because if you listen to, say, one recording, if I'm going to prepare, let's say, Dvorak Concerto, and I listen only to Jacqueline Dupre's recording over and over and over again, thousands of times, of course, my interpretation is likely going to become biased towards the interpretation that she produced. And that's going to be somewhat of a single-minded approach, and also not a very personal approach to me. It's personal to her, of course, obviously, but not to me. But if you listen to 1,000 recordings of the Dvorak Concerto, it's impossible to be biased, I think. And also, listening to all of those, especially the great recordings of our lineage, of our history, and of the tradition of classical music, that's going to give us a much greater knowledge expertise and understanding of this glorious art form that we are a part of and that we are trying to pass on, so that your performance does not just come out of nothing and is completely random and nonsensical, but it is clearly rooted in the tradition of what we do. This tradition that has been going on for centuries, you know. And of course, that can be up to personal preference. Perhaps you would rather give a performance that is just completely raw and purely your own and has no context. But I personally believe that everything that we do comes from something. It comes from the people that came before us, comes from our teachers, is passed on through this tradition. So I believe very strongly in listening and learning from as many interpreters as you can find, and try to appreciate something in everybody's playing. You know, I think so many people, they have such strong likes and dislikes in music making that if somebody does one little tiny thing that goes against what they believe in, then they will not be able to listen to that recording at all. They won't gain anything from it. They won't enjoy anything about it, you know. And if you're like that, you know, that's fine. In one sense, it means you have very strong values, strong musical values. But at the same time, I think it means you're missing out, you know. You're missing out on the great diversity of musical artists that we have in this world. So I try to appreciate something in everybody's playing, and that can be something totally different, could be something very small or something very large, you know, but to appreciate great art, and not just one type of art, but great art. Yeah. So those are my few tips for this week. I hope that gives you all some inspiration in your work going forward, listening to recordings of your own and of others, and how that can potentially help your playing, maybe give you new ideas, or in the case of listening to yourself, to ideally, you know, give yourself a confidence in what you do, actually. Yeah, to appreciate what others do in their music, and also appreciate what you do in your own music. Yeah, because if you don't have that appreciation, I'll tell you, it's going to be hard to make other people appreciate it. Yeah, so you have to know what you stand for, know what you represent, and be confident in how you produce that. All right, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching, joining me again on my channel here, and I hope you have a great day.